The town of Rosenwald, a small town surrounded by wheat fields and dense forests in the German countryside, seemed like a place suspended in time. The narrow cobblestone streets and half-timbered houses painted in shades of white and brown held secrets and ancient stories, but also sadness that spanned generations. Two families had dominated that community for decades. Thickrager and the Weissman. The resentment between them stemmed from ancient land disputes, wounded pride, and intrigues fueled by pride and tradition. It was a rivalry that no longer needed words. It was in the suspicious glances exchanged at fairs, in the silence that fell over one family member when they crossed paths with another. Growing up in Rosenwald meant inheriting this resentment as an inevitable legacy. It was in this scenario that Tiva Weissman and Lukas Krugerthe were born almost at the same time. During their childhood, they had only seen each other a few times, always from a distance, under the watchful eye of their parents. As the years passed, the distance between them grew larger, not due to a lack of interest, but due to the adult's imposition. But fate, capricious, always finds a way to unite what it tries to separate. It was autumn 1941. The weather already had the smell of dry leaves and the chill of longer nights. The town was preparing for the traditional harvest festival, a celebration that, even in wartime, still brought residents together. That evening, the church hall was decorated with wreaths of wheat and dried flowers, and music echoed through the open windows. The war seemed far away, even though the radios repeated grim news day after day. Eva, then 18, had a serene and delicate beauty. Her light brown hair fell in waves to her shoulders, and her green eyes conveyed a restlessness that few noticed. An only child, she felt trapped in a world of rules and appearances that didn't belong to her. Lukas, on the other hand, was a young man of 19, with a proud stance, broad shoulders, and a determined gaze. He worked the family lands, but his heart longed for something more than a predetermined future amidst plantations and inherited grudges. He was known for being reserved, but always respectful. The party was the scene of the unexpected. During the evening, amidst dancing and conversation, chance brought them face to face. A group of young people were organizing a group dance, and when they changed partners, Lukas and Eva, unable to avoid it, ended up holding hands in the middle of the room. It was a brief, almost involuntary touch, but enough to make their gaze linger longer than it should have. For a moment, the world around them disappeared. There were no warring families, no rules, no invisible walls. They were alone, recognizing in each other something that no prohibition could erase. A deep affinity, a flame lit in the silence of a simple gesture. After the dance, the two of them drifted away, filled with a mixture of surprise and unease. But how could they escape what had already awakened? In the days that followed, they crossed paths by chance in the square, at the bakery, on the paths between the plantations. Each encounter brought with it a furtive glance, a restrained smile, a whispered word. Fate conspired once more. One afternoon, Eva took refuge in the old village library, a forgotten building, almost always empty. There, among the dusty shelves, she found Lukas, also seeking a quiet refuge. It was the first time they were able to talk unhurriedly, without fear of prying eyes. They discovered unexpected affinities, a love of literature, a longing for a world beyond the narrow confines of Rosenwald, and a weariness of carrying a guilt and hatred that were not their own. The words flowed with a disconcerting ease, as if they had been speaking for years. From that afternoon on, the library became their secret place. There, among old books and dusty windows, their friendship grew and gave way to something stronger, deeper. It was a budding love, forbidden, but impossible to deny. Each encounter strengthened the bond between them. Their conversations became more intimate, their gazes more intense. One day, as they said goodbye, Lukas held Eva's hand for a moment longer than permitted. Their gazes met, and the truth hung in the air. What they felt could no longer be contained. But fear was also growing. They both knew what would happen if they were discovered. Their families would never accept it. The town, with its sharp tongues and stifling moralism, could make them targets of ridicule and condemnation. Still, love continued to flow, like a river that finds openings even in the hardest rocks. Eva and Lukas couldn't and didn't want to deny what they felt. Every secret letter exchanged, every secret meeting, was an act of courage against a world that wanted them apart. But they had no idea that the true enemy was yet to come. an enemy who didn't hide from their family's eyes, but marched along the borders of Europe, ready to swallow up dreams and separate hearts, to war. As the weeks passed, what had started as a chance encounter at the harvest festival grew into something deeper and impossible to ignore. Eva and Lukas, they began to experience small moments, crumbs of happiness amidst the landscape of repression and oppressive tradition. Every glance exchanged, every hidden letter, every encounter in the library was a ray of light in a world that wanted them in the shadows. They both knew they carried the weight of generations on their shoulders. The families Kruger and Weissman, not only did they despise each other, but they had become prisoners of an ancestral pride. Their parents viewed the past as a kind of unquestionable foundation, and any attempt at reconciliation was considered weakness. It was as if the very blood that ran through their veins compelled them to keep alive a hatred that no longer made sense. For Eva, the pressure was constant and suffocating. Your mother, Mrs. Weissman, was a strict woman, devoted to appearances and traditions. She told her daughter day after day that her destiny was a good marriage with someone of respectable name. That is, from any family other than the Kriegers. As for the father, Mr. Weissman, an austere and severe man, he made it clear that any deviation from this expectation would be an unforgivable disgrace. Lukas did not escape either. The father, Mr. Kruger, harbored a deep resentment against the Weissman, compounded by old land disputes and the loss of a brother in a past conflict involving the two families. For him, seeing his son look at a Weissman was a betrayal. His mother, a more docile woman, simply feared for Lukas's future, advising him to stay away from trouble. But love, once awakened, is like a seed that insists on growing, even in the most arid soil. Eva's visits to the library became more frequent, disguised as study sessions or embroidery classes with a teacher friend. Lukas, for his part, took alternative routes, slipping through alleys and paths between the plantations to avoid being seen. The encounters were brief, but full of intensity. There, among the old books and the smell of aged paper, they created a world of their own. They talked about their dreams, a future far from Rosenwald, where they could live free from family ties. Lukas wanted to study engineering, build bridges, and travel. Eva dreamed of a small bookstore in a big city, where she could share her love of literature. Each conversation brought them closer. Hands that had once touched by chance now intertwined naturally. Glances turned into silent declarations, and inevitably, the first kiss arrived, shy, hesitant, but loaded with meaning. It was then that they both knew there was no turning back. They were irrevocably united. Over time, the letters became a bridge between the days when they couldn't see each other, hidden in books, left under stones in an old wall near the church. These letters contained deep feelings. Lukas wrote with restrained passion, "If this world were more just, I would walk with you hand in hand through the square without fear. But for now, every word written is a vow of hope that one day this will be possible." Eve responded with equal tenderness, "Even though the walls of our families rise like fortresses, my heart no longer belongs to them. It's yours, and no one can take it from you." But the fear of being discovered was constant. The town's streets were filled with watchful eyes, and one slip was enough to bring everything crashing down. Therefore, every step was calculated, and every gesture veiled. Fear was a constant companion, and paradoxically, made the love even more ardent, more urgent. There was also the anxiety of time. The war, which until then seemed like a distant echo, began to approach like an inevitable shadow. The young people of the village were summoned more and more frequently. The radios brought ever more somber news about the battles in the east. It was as if fate were preparing an even crueler blow for those two passionate hearts. One afternoon, during one of their secret meetings, Lukas spoke in a serious tone. "If war takes me, I want you to know, no distance, no trench, can kill what I feel for you." Eve took his hands, and her eyes filled with tears. "And I will wait, no matter how long, no matter how many unanswered letters I have to write." However, the danger signs were everywhere. Recently, a neighbor had mentioned seeing Eva walking near the old library in the company of a boy from the wrong family. The rumor, even whispered, could spread like wildfire. Lukas and Eva knew they had to be even more careful. The fear of an impending tragedy loomed over them like a storm about to break. Yet even under the weight of traditions, gazes, and the threat of war, they continued. Because, in the end, Loving, even in secret, even at risk, was better than not loving at all. Every encounter was an act of resistance. Every word exchanged, a reaffirmation that life cannot be completely controlled by old grudges. But even they didn't imagine that the biggest blow was yet to come, and that, soon, another separation would force them to fight not only against their families, but against time itself and the horrors of war. How much Eva and Lukas they were careful. No matter how carefully they planned each meeting, there was one thing they couldn't control: the eyes and tongues of the village. Rosenwald was small, and rumors traveled as fast as the wind across the fields. It was on a grey afternoon when everything began to fall apart. The library, a safe haven for so many months, became the scene of the first slip. A young man named ofEva's distant cousin, a gossipy boy, was walking down the side street when he saw Lukas's silhouette discreetly emerging from the building. He recognized him immediately. He wasn't difficult to spot: Kruger in Rosenwald. Later, when he heard Eva leave a few minutes later, he didn't need anything else to build a story. And stories, in Rosenwald, didn't need proof to be dangerous. That evening, during dinner at the Weissman's house, Otto, with a cynical smile, dropped the bombshell. "I saw someone interesting in the library today. It seemed like some of the girls had been studying more than we thought." The look of Miss Weissman rose from the soup like a whip. "What are you talking about, Otto?" With an innocent air, the young man continued. "Well, Eva left right after a certain Lukas Kruger. Strange, don't you think, man?" The silence that followed was deadly. Mr. Weissman's spoon landed slowly on the table. Mrs. Weissman, he turned pale, and Eve, unable to hide her concern, lowered her gaze. It didn't take long for the fury to erupt. "And the truth," roared Mr. Weissman. "Will you meet with that traitor?" Eva tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Tears began to form, not from guilt, but from helplessness, in the face of the injustice being orchestrated against her. "Responda," insisted the father, with increasing force. "Attempt, he finally whispered. "But it's not what you think. We love each other." The word love struck me as an insult. Mr. Weissman's fist hit the table so hard that the glasses rattled. "This is a disgrace to our family. As long as I live, I will never allow you to have any connection with that worm." Mrs. Weissman, trying to maintain some composure, but equally overwhelmed by prejudice, added, "Eva, my daughter, you don't understand. They hate us. They've always hated us. It's a childish illusion to believe it could be any different." Tears streamed down Eva's face, but there was something stronger than fear inside her, an unshakable certainty of what she felt. "You can ban me, you can lock me up at home, but you can't change what's in my heart." The words enraged the father even more. "From now on, you won't go out alone anymore. Library, no walks. And if that boy dares to come near you again, he'll pay dearly." Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Lukas still didn't know what had happened, but soon the shadows of the scandal would reach him. The next day, Mr. Kruger received an unexpected visit. Mr. Weissman, accompanied by 2 other men from the family, knocked on the door with a threatening air. Without beating around the bush, he launched his accusation. "Your son is seducing my daughter. He's tarnishing the honor of my house. This is over now." Mr. Kruger, as proud as his rival, was not intimidated. "My son doesn't need to seduce anyone. If there's anything going on between them, maybe your daughter has something to do with it. But know this, if you touch Lukas, you'll have to answer for it." The atmosphere between the families became unbearable. The town was soon filled with rumors. Disapproving glances multiplied. What had once been a secret love affair turned into a public scandal. For Lukas, the news came through a trusted friend. Upon hearing this, he rushed to try to find Eva, but discovered she was practically a prisoner at home. Letters, which had once flowed freely, now had to be delivered at extreme risk, if they were delivered at all. One rainy night, Lukas managed to approach the Weissman's back fence. Using a small signal mirror, he agreed on a code with Eva. When he saw the flash of light in response, his heart sank. He managed to slip a small note between the slats of the fence. "My love, I'm fine, but they're watching me. They want to force me into marriage. I don't know how long I'll hold out, but my love for you is stronger than anything. Don't forget me." Lukas felt a mixture of despair and rebellion. The siege was closing in. Action was needed. In the following weeks, the two began planning an escape. It was the only way out. But before they could put their plan into action, another tragedy would befall them, a blow that would come not from their families, but from the world at war. Lukas's call-up to join the army was on the way. After weeks of tension, with Eva confined under the watchful eye of her parents, and Lukas watched over by the growing distrust of the town, both came to the same conclusion. There was no longer any room for hope in Rosenwald. The love they shared was seen as an affront. Their families would never accept it, and each passing day only made the situation more untenable. But what really sparked the urgency was a letter from the capital, addressed to Mr. Kruger, an official notification. Lukas had been called up for military service. The war, until then a distant shadow, now brutally invaded their lives. When Lukas read the summons, he felt the ground slip from under his feet. The filing date was approaching. He would have to leave in a few weeks. The news, which would soon spread, would make any attempt to contact Eva impossible. There was no time to wait. That same night, risking everything, Lukas headed to the back fence of Weissman's house. It was raining heavily. The drops fell on the leaves like a symphony of omens. He knew the security would be increased, but he had to take the risk. With the agreed-upon signal, he waited anxiously. For minutes that seemed eternal, nothing happened. But then a dim light appeared from Eva's bedroom window. A few moments later, she appeared, pale, with dark circles under her eyes, but her eyes still shone with love. With a desperate effort, Lukas whispered, "Eva, there's no more time. They've called me. They're taking me to the front." Eva's eyes filled with tears. No. It can't be. "Lukas, if you leave, what if something happens? I'll never see you again." He took a deep breath. "That's why we have to run. Before they catch me, we can't wait any longer. Tomorrow night, at dusk, we'll meet behind the old church. I've got everything planned. We'll take the road south, cross into the big city. There, no one will recognize us. We can start all over again." Eve hesitated, not because she doubted his love, but because fear, like an invisible chain, weighed on her. "My mother suspects everything. They won't even let me go out into the garden alone. What if they find out? What if they catch us?" Lukas held his hands between the slats of the fence, feeling the cold of his fingers. "My love, I'd rather risk everything than live without you. If we stay here, we'll be destroyed, and the war... It could take away my chance to return. I can't go to the front without at least trying. Without you by my side, nothing will make sense." Eva closed her eyes, fighting back tears. Deep down, she'd already made up her mind. The life her parents had planned for her, a forced marriage, an existence of appearances and bitterness, was no life at all. Lukas was her only truth, her only future. "Tomorrow," he said finally, his voice trembling but firm. "I'll be there, behind the church. I promise." Both hearts beat like drums. It was a promise sealed within the limits of time. The next day, the world seemed to conspire against them. In the morning, Mrs. Weissman informed Eva that they had received a formal marriage proposal from a young man from another respectable family. The parents' plan was clear: to marry their daughter off as quickly as possible, to distance her from any memory of Lukas. Eva feigned resignation, but inside she was counting the hours. Meanwhile, Lukas prepared everything he could. He packed a small backpack, some clothes, some hard-earned money, and forged documents an acquaintance had obtained for him in exchange for favors. He also reviewed Eva's letters, every word, every line, a fragment of the love that drove him. At dusk, when the village had fallen silent, Lukas quietly left the house. His heart beat with a mixture of anxiety and hope. Every step toward the church was charged with meaning, not just an escape, but a fight for the right to love. Behind the old church, in the faint moonlight filtering through the clouds, he waited. Each minute seemed like an eternity. The sound of a twig snapping in the distance made his chest tighten. What if he couldn't get out? What if they had found out? But then, a delicate figure appeared between the trees. It was Eva, wrapped in a dark coat, her face pale but resolute. She carried only a small bag and an old notebook, her letters and a book of poems, the only possessions she had allowed herself to take. When they saw each other, they ran toward each other, hugging tightly. For a moment, all fear vanished. "You came," Lukas whispered excitedly. "I couldn't not come," Eva replied. "You are my everything." But before they could take the first step toward freedom, a sound cut through the night. Voices, distant screams. Someone had seen them. The families, alerted, began searching. Lukas took Eva's hand. "Run. "Don't look back." But it was too late. Figures began to appear between the trees. The escape, so carefully planned, was crumbling before their eyes. Surrounded, they were forcibly separated. Eva, dragged by her own parents, screamed for Lukas. He, held back by the villagers, struggled in vain. The dream of escape shattered there, on the cold night floor. But in their hearts remained one certainty. The war had not yet begun, and they had not yet surrendered. The failed escape left deep scars on both of them. Eva forcibly taken back home. She was locked in her room for days, with no contact with the outside world. Lukas, immobilized and humiliated, in front of the people, was handed over to his father under clear threats. Any new attempt at rapprochement would be costly. But while the families celebrated their triumph and believed they had restored their honor, little did they know that the greatest enemy came not from the hearts of the lovers, but from the very front lines of the war that advanced mercilessly. A few days after the incident, the inevitable happened. An official letter arrived at the Kriegers' home. This time without a reply, Lukas was to report to the infantry battalion that would depart for the Eastern Front in 7 days. There were no more delays or loopholes. It was time to put on the uniform and march toward an uncertain future. When he received the news, Lukas felt his chest tighten unbearably. It wasn't just the prospect of war that terrified him. It was knowing he was being separated from Eva, with no chance of saying goodbye. The escape attempt had failed. The surveillance was constant, and the families were more hostile than ever. That night, in his room, sitting by the dim light of a lamp, Lukas stared at the summons on the table. The words danced before his eyes. The date of the presentation, the city of departure, and a single thought pounding in his mind. I can't leave without telling her how I feel, without letting her know that I won't forget her, no matter what. Taking a sheet of paper, with trembling hands, he began to write. Each word carried a fierce urgency, as if time were slipping away with every stroke of the pen. My Eva, if this letter reaches you, you will know that my destiny calls me. I couldn't see you or hold you one last time, but in my heart I carry your name, your gaze, your love. I don't know what the war has in store for me, but I promise you that every beat of my heart, every step, will be for you. If one day I don't return, remember this: I loved you more than life itself. Once the letter was finished, Lukas folded it carefully and entrusted it to his most faithful friend, Klaus, a young man from the town who knew their story and, despite the risks, promised to hand her over. "Do this for me, Klaus, before you go." Klaus nodded, his face grim. Meanwhile, Eva, still a prisoner in her own home, felt a growing anguish in her heart. Arguments between her parents became more frequent. They insisted on speeding up the arranged marriage, fearing that new scandals would tarnish the family's reputation. But Eva resisted with fierce obstinacy, refusing any compromise. The nights were the hardest, lying in the dark. I listened to the wind against the windows and imagined Lukas somewhere in the village, perhaps equally lost in his thoughts and grief. He didn't know about the call. He didn't know that time had become his greatest enemy. Until, on the morning of the 5th day, Klaus managed to approach her bedroom window, disguised as a messenger. In a moment of distraction, the maid threw a small stone at the window. Eva, recognizing the sin, ran to open a small opening. With urgent eyes, Klaus whispered, "They've summoned him. He's leaving in 2 days. He asked me to give you this." Eva's hands trembled as she received the letter. When she read the first lines, uncontrollable tears began to flow. Lukas's departure was a blow she wasn't prepared to bear. As soon as Klaus left, Eva realized she needed to act. She tore off a piece of paper, grabbed a pencil, and wrote a hurried but sincere response. "My dear Lukas, this news shatters my heart. I can't bear the thought of you leaving without at least knowing from me that my love for you will never die. If there's any way, a moment before you leave, try to see me. I'll wait for you, even if only for a moment, near the old bridge, at dusk tomorrow. If you can't come, be sure of this: I will always love you." Once again, Klaus acted as the intermediary. Lukas received the letter at dusk and, without hesitation, decided he would try. Even with patrols in the village, even knowing the risks, he wouldn't leave without attempting one last meeting. On the eve of his departure, his uniform already prepared, Lukas secretly left the house, his heart burning. He arrived at the bridge shortly before midnight, enveloped in the cold fog rising from the river. For long minutes, he waited in silence. The sound of soft footsteps on the gravel announced his presence. Eva had appeared, dressed in a dark cloak, and with her hair tied back under a scarf. When their gazes met, no words were necessary. They ran toward each other and hugged tightly, as if they wanted to merge their souls. There, in the silence of dawn, they swore eternal love to each other. They promised to write to each other as often as possible. And Luke, tenderly holding Eva's face, said, "No matter where I am, my heart will be yours, and I will return. For you, I will return." The hours slipped away like sand through their fingers. When the first signs of dawn appeared, they had to say goodbye. With a final kiss filled with tears and hope, they parted. The next morning, in his uniform and with his backpack on his shoulder, Lukas boarded with his battalion. As the train pulled away, amidst smoke and shouts, he looked toward the horizon, holding Eva's last letter in his pocket, an amulet against fear. The war had begun, and with it, a new chapter in their story. A chapter written in blood, longing, and love. The train he took Lukas and the other young soldiers at the front seemed to advance, not only across the lines of territory, but also through time itself, as if every kilometer took them further away from who they had been until then. Lukas's face, once marked by youth and the glow of newfound love, now had a gravity that no one in Rosenwald had ever seen. He knew the war was relentless. He knew he might never return. But there was something I also knew. No matter where he was, he wrote to Eva, as long as he had life and strength. His words would be the invisible thread that kept them connected. The first night at camp was a nightmare of strange sounds, harsh orders, and a biting cold that seeped through his clothes. But finding a small moment of solitude, Lukas carefully took out a leather notebook, a gift his grandfather had left him, and began to write. By the flickering light of a candle, the words came like a breath of life. "My Eve, my light, my love. Today I woke up in a place so far removed from everything we know that it feels like another world. But inside me, you're alive, in every thought. The train brought me here, and men talk of battles and glories, but all my heart desires is your embrace. I don't know when this letter will arrive, or even if it will, but writing it gives me strength. I promised I would return, and I promise once more, for you, I will survive." When he finished, his chest felt a little lighter. The letter would be delivered by war mail, an uncertain system, but the only hope he had. He handed it to a postal officer and returned to his post. Meanwhile, in Rosenwald, life is ... Eva followed like an echo of absence. After Lukas left, her parents further intensified the siege. They tried to force her to accept the arranged marriage, claiming that a worthy groom could erase the scandal. But Eva refused to give in. Deep down in her heart, only one thing mattered: news of Lukas. The days grew long, the nights unbearable. Fear gnawed at her. What would happen if she fell in the first battle? What would happen if she never heard your voice again? But despite everything Eva wrote, as a ritual, she would sit in her room, by the lamplight, and pour out everything she felt on paper. "My dear Lukas, every day without you is an eternity. I treasure your last kiss like a treasure. I can still feel your touch, your voice whispering promises that give me strength. Here everything seems colder, emptier, but the hope of receiving your words sustains me. Please, write. Every line of yours will be my food. Don't forget me. Don't leave me in this loneliness." The first few weeks passed. The fighting was sporadic, but the fear was constant. Amid the marches and the distant gunfire, Lukas clung to a single thought: Eva was waiting for him. Whenever I could, I wrote. They weren't long letters, sometimes just a few lines, but they were imbued with feeling. "My Eva, today I saw a starry sky that made me think of you. Under this same sky, I know you to look at the stars and look for me. I'm fine, but war is cruel. Every day is a struggle to maintain hope, but your love protects me. I keep fighting for us." The letters, when they arrived, were a bomb for Eva. She read and reread every word, storing them in a wooden box that she hid under the floorboards of her room. In turn, Lukas awaited Eva's replies with feverish anxiety. When a war messenger arrived at the camp, the soldiers would rush to see if there was anything from home. Upon receiving a letter from her, Lukas would quietly walk away, carefully open the envelope, and read each line as if it were a locket. "My beloved, know that every night I pray for you. I imagine you strong, brave, resisting for our love. Don't let the war erase your smile. Here I count the days, and even if 1,000 years passed, I would wait for you. But the merciless war offered no respite. After a relatively peaceful month, Lukas's battalion was transferred to a more dangerous front line. The fighting grew more intense, casualties mounted, and writing became more difficult. Sometimes weeks went by without him being able to send any news. Still, in the intervals between one attack and another, Lukas forced himself to write, even if it was just a note. My life, if these are my last words, know that I loved you until the end, but I won't give up. For you, I resist, always. The absence of letters began to torment Eva. Every knock on the door made her heart skip a beat. Every soldier who passed through the village brought her a mixture of hope and despair. But then, one rainy morning, a wartime postman arrived at Rosenwald with a small bundle of letters. Among them was a yellowed envelope, marked by time and the dust of war. It was from Lukas. Opening the letter, with trembling hands, Eva read, "My eternal love, the battles are hard. Many of my comrades are already gone, but I'm alive. For you, for us, I'm still standing. I don't know how much longer I can hold out, but as long as I can write, you'll be my refuge. Hold on tight. I'll be right back." Eva's tears soaked the paper, and at that moment I knew, no matter how long the war lasted, their love would survive in every letter, and as long as there were words, there would be hope. In Rosenwald, time seemed to move unevenly. The days were slow, filled with constant tension, while the nights brought an almost unbearable loneliness. Eva life had become a repetitive cycle of pretense and resistance. Outwardly, she maintained the facade of an obedient daughter. Inside, she was waging a war as fierce as the one she had been fighting. Lukas looking ahead. Since Lukas's escape, attempt, and departure, his parents' surveillance had become relentless. Mr. Weissman, stricter than ever, had forbidden him any contact with the outside world that wasn't strictly supervised. Even going to church, once a moment of respite, now took place under his mother's watchful eye. Correspondence was monitored, and visitors were limited. Any sign of defiance was immediately suppressed. But Eva was no longer the submissive young woman her parents had known. Something had changed inside her. The love she felt for Lukas, fueled by every letter she received, and every memory of their time together, had become a guiding light. Even surrounded by walls, it refused to be destroyed. Lukas's letters, when they arrived, were hidden with the utmost care. He kept them in a small wooden box, under a loose floorboard in his room. There, in the loneliest hours of the night, he reread each line, each word, as if they were promises engraved on his heart. Their words gave him the strength to endure. My Eva, even in the trenches, even under enemy fire, I think of you. Your love is my shield. Don't let anyone force you into a life you don't want. Fight, as I fight. One day we'll be together again. These words echoed in her mind as she faced increasing pressure from her parents. Mrs. Weissman, fearing for her daughter's future and the family's reputation, she insisted on a quick marriage. A suitor had been chosen, Heinrich Bauer, son of an influential merchant and a man of dubious character, but of good name by the village standards. Eva, it's been too long, said the mother. It's time to think about your future. Lukas won't come back, and even if he did, they'd never accept him here. Heinrich is a good candidate. It's your duty to accept him. But Eve stood firm. I don't love Heinrich. I can't marry someone I don't love. These words sparked heated debates night after night. Mr. White even shouted and banged her fists on the table, threatening to further restrict her freedom. But nothing could break Eva's resolve. Deep down she knew, to give in would kill everything that was true in her heart. While resisting at home, Eva looked for ways to maintain communication with Lukas's. With the help of Klaus, who continued to serve as an intermediary, was able to send and receive letters sporadically. Each new line from Lukas was a breath of fresh air. But as the war progressed, the letters began to arrive late. Months passed without any news. Fear grew. What would have happened if Lukas had been injured? What if still? Eva refused to give up. Every day, she lit a candle on the windowsill, gazing up at the night sky. It was her silent ritual, a way of telling Lukas, wherever he was, that she was still waiting for him. As the village sank deeper into the dark climate of war, more and more young men were recruited, and news of lost battles arrived in droves. Eva became a symbol of resistance. Even villagers who had previously murmured against her began to regard her with silent respect. She was a young woman who defied everything: traditions, parents, fear. One afternoon, during a supervised trip to church, an elderly lady, known as Mrs. Annalise, discreetly approached Eva. With a knowing look, he whispered, "Don't give up, girl. True love is stronger than war. May God protect you." Simple words, but they deeply moved Eva. Not everyone was against her, and even if they were, she wouldn't change her mind. The days dragged on, the pressures mounted. But then, one rainy afternoon, when she'd almost given up hope of receiving more news, Klaus managed to deliver a letter. The envelope was dirty, stained with mud, its corners torn, but it was from Lukas. "My light, the time between our letters is cruel, but knowing you're still waiting for me gives me strength. I survive for you. The battles are brutal. I've lost friends. I've seen horrors I can't describe. But your love keeps me human. Don't let them force you. Resist. One day I'll return. For you, for us." Eva wept as she read those lines, but they were tears of renewed hope. If Lukas could endure the hell of war, she would endure her own hell at home. That night, he lit the candle once more, holding the letter close to his chest. He looked up at the cloudy sky and made a silent promise. "I'll wait for you, no matter how long, no matter what they try to force on me. My love for you is eternal. And God willing, one day we'll walk together again, free." And so, between fear and courage, Eva continued. Because true love, as Lukas had once told her, does not yield to war. It resists, it survives. That year winter came early. Rosenwald. Frost covered the fields in the morning, and the chimneys smoked day and night in the village houses. But inside the house Weissman, the cold wasn't just climatic, it was emotional. Between Eva and her parents, the silence had become dense, almost palpable. Neither side gave in, and despite all the pressure, she remained steadfast, resisting the forced marriage, clinging with all her strength to the remaining hope, Lukas's letters. But with the arrival of winter, something changed. The flow of mail decreased dramatically. Without warning, the letters stopped arriving. For weeks, Eva anxiously awaited the familiar knock on the window, the arrival of Klaus, for the envelope with Lukas's unmistakable handwriting. But it didn't arrive. At first, she tried to convince herself that it was all due to the chaos of war, the snow-blocked roads, or military censorship. But as the days passed, her anxiety turned to fear. Every dawn was torture. Every knock on the door made his heart race in the hope of finding the postman, only to be followed by bitter disappointment. The nights were even worse. The pillow, once a refuge for Lukas's dreams, became a confidant for the tears he could no longer hold back. Eva began to waste away. Her skin lost its glow, her eyes became dull, and even the small joys of everyday life were fading. But still, she refused to accept the worst. "He is alive," she repeated to herself in her thoughts. "He promised to return. He will return." But the silence, like a slow poison, began to corrode his hope. The people weren't helpful. The news coming from the front was increasingly grim. Rumors spoke of decimated battalions, missing soldiers, and ruined cities. The names of the dead began to be announced in the squares. Every list read in public sent shivers down Eva's spine. But Lukas's name still hadn't appeared. That, at least, was a small relief. One morning, Eva found Klaus at the village fair. He discreetly led her to a corner, his expression serious. "Eva, ... I haven't been able to get any news. The front has shifted. Many messengers aren't arriving. I don't know where Lukas is now. No one knows." Klaus's words hit Eva like a punch, but she stood her ground. "He is alive," she said, more to herself than to Klaus. "It has to be." Still, the emptiness persisted. Without Lukas's words, without a thread of connection to him, Eva began to feel the weight of isolation. Her parents' attempts to force her into marriage returned with renewed force, taking advantage of her fragility. "That's enough, Eva," said the mother. "He's forgotten about you. Or worse, ... He's no longer alive. We can no longer allow you to destroy your future for a dream." But Eve did not bow. "Until I know he's gone, I won't accept. Another man, my heart belongs to him." With each refusal, the tension in the house increased. The arguments became more frequent. Mr. Weissman even threatened to lock her in her room again. But Eva, despite her fear, faced them with surprising courage. Her love for Lukas had given her a strength she herself had never known. But the silence of the letters continued. Months passed. Winter gave way to a timid spring. But for Eva, the flowers that bloomed seemed to mock her pain. She continued to light the candle in the window every night. It was her ritual, her only visible link to Lukas. It was one of those nights, sitting by the window, that Eva collapsed. Hugging the box where she kept her old letters, she whispered through tears, "Where are you, my love? Why don't you write to me? I'd give anything for a word from you, for a sign that you're alive." Memories of her time with Lukas, the conversations in the library, the escape plans, that last embrace on the bridge. It all came back, like a painful movie in her mind, and each scene was a knife in her chest. The pain became so intense that for a moment, Eva almost gave up. She almost believed her parents' words. She was on the verge of giving up. But then he picked up one of Lukas's old letters, the one he read most often. "My Eva, even if my letters don't arrive one day, even if the world tries to separate us, know that my love for you is immortal. I will never forget you. I will never stop fighting for you." These words were his rebirth. He wiped away his tears. Their love was greater than his fear, and even if silence tried to kill him, she wouldn't allow it. From that day on, she decided she wouldn't give up. She sent new letters with Klaus, still unsure if they would arrive. She wrote long pages recounting her days, how she endured, how she still waited for him. "My beloved, I don't know where you are or if my words reach you, but I keep writing, because as long as there is life in me, I will wait for you. My love for you is endless, and God willing, one day we will meet again." Thus, between fear and hope, between pain and courage, Eve endured. Because even in the deepest silence, true love speaks louder. Spring was advancing slowly in Rosenwald, but inside Eva, winter lingered. As much as the world around her blossomed, she remained trapped in an oppressive silence. Months had passed since Eva's last letter. Lukas, the nights turned into long vigils, the days into a constant effort to keep hope alive. Still, she wrote. Every week she wrote a new letter to Lukas and entrusted it to him. Klaus, who, despite all the difficulties and dangers, continued trying to send them through contacts in the military mail. It was a ritual of resistance. While she wrote, while she spoke to him in her thoughts, he continued to exist for her. But the emptiness was beginning to weigh on her. There were days when Eva could barely stand. Her face had turned pale and her features thin. Even the townspeople noticed her suffering, and some, silently, began to respect her stubbornness. It was just one day, when I least expected it, that fate finally gave me a ray of hope again. One afternoon, while Eva was helping her mother organize the Klzetzer task she performed mechanically to avoid further arguments, she heard a commotion coming from the street. She looked out the window and saw an old postman from the neighboring village arriving on horseback. He wasn't the usual postman, and that caught her attention. Klausi appeared shortly after, breathless, discreetly calling her into the backyard, taking advantage of a moment when her mother was out to get more clothes. Eva ran toward him, her heart racing. "Eva," Klaus said with shining eyes. The old postman brought a late mail package. It came from an isolated border post during the winter. Among it was this. He pulled a crumpled envelope from his coat, its corners frayed and its paper yellowed. But what mattered was the handwriting. Unmistakable. The era of Lukas Eva's world stopped for a moment. With trembling hands, she took the envelope and pressed it to her chest. Tears sprang to her eyes even before she opened the letter. "He's alive, ... whisper. He still lives." Without waiting, she ran to her room and closed the door. She sat down on the bed and, with all the care in the world, broke the already worn seal. The sheet inside was a little torn, stained with mud and perhaps blood, but the words were there, intact. "Me Eterna, Eva." These words are written in a makeshift shelter, in the relentless rain. "I don't know if they'll reach you. The battles have been relentless. Many have fallen. Sometimes fear touches me, but your face, your love, are my anchor. I am wounded, but alive. Don't be afraid for me. Every day, every night, I think of our reunion. I write to you whenever I can, but I don't know if my letters will ever reach you. If they do, know that I am still fighting. For you, for us. Never lose hope, my love." Tears flowed profusely. Eva read and reread those lines dozens of times. Each word was like a breath of life in her sleeping chest. Lukas was alive. Wounded, yes, but fighting. Thinking of her. I still loved her. For a moment, all the pain, all the uncertainty, all the loneliness seemed to dissipate. Hope, dormant for so long, was reborn with force. Eva knew she couldn't show anything in front of her parents. But that night, for the first time in months, her eyes lit up. She relit the window candle with more faith than ever and, sitting at her desk, began to write a new letter with feverish hands. My beloved Lukas, I received your letter ... after so long. You have no idea what your words meant to me. Knowing that you live, that you still think of me, gives me the strength to endure everything. No matter how long this war lasts, or how much longer it takes, I will wait for you. I resist for you. I live for you. And one day God will unite us. Take care, my love. Don't let the darkness overcome you. With tears running down her face, she folded the letter and handed it to Klaus the next morning. From that moment on, a new energy took hold of Eva. Even when her parents again pressured her to marry, she faced them with renewed determination. I won't get married. Lukas is alive, and as long as I'm alive, I'll wait for him. The exasperated parents tried to argue and threaten, but they couldn't break him. The certainty that Lukas was alive, that he was still writing, was an impenetrable shield. The days that followed were less burdensome. Not because the situation had changed, the war was still raging and uncertainty still lingered, but because Eva now had a concrete hope to cling to, and that made all the difference. She began to go out more, walking through the fields with Klaus in secret, picking flowers to leave by the candle in her window. Small gestures that, to someone looking in from the outside, might not have meant anything, but to her, they were silent declarations of love and resilience. The silence of the letters, which had nearly destroyed her, had finally been broken. And in that shred of hope, Eva found the strength to move forward. Because as long as Lukas lived, as long as his words crossed seas of mud and blood to reach her, nothing, not even war, could truly separate them. Months had passed since the Neverhard received the long-awaited letter from Lukas. Hope, reborn by those words, sustained her soul every day. But the merciless war continued to drag on, and subsequent letters became scarce again. It was as if each written line had to pass through a labyrinth of rubble and death before reaching her hands. Meanwhile, in Rosenwald the war began to leave visible marks. Many of the village's young men never returned. Those who did had a void in their eyes that was difficult to cope with. Each arrival of a soldier was a mixture of joy and fear. Joy at seeing them alive, fear for what they brought with them. Eva, however, remained steadfast. Her parents' pressure continued, but she remained unyielding. As long as there is a chance, I will wait for you. That was the promise, she repeated like a mantra. The nights continued with the candle lit in the window and her eyes fixed on the sky, sending up silent prayers for Lukas's survival. One morning, the village was surprised by an unexpected announcement. A small group of soldiers was returning to the village. It wasn't an official celebration. There was no time for festivities anymore, but families, eager for news, flocked to the makeshift station. The news spread quickly. Eva learned about it through Klaus. Eva, the soldiers are coming back. I don't know if Lukas is among them, but we have to go. Her heart raced. She didn't dare get her hopes up too much. The fear of another disappointment was with her, but she needed to be there. It was stronger than any prudence. She put on a simple coat, tied her hair up, and, with Klaus at her side, walked to the small dock where the improvised transport was scheduled to arrive. The place was filled with families, mothers with tears in their eyes, siblings, children. The muffled sound of conversations mingled with the icy wind. Eva was shivering, not only from the cold, but from the anxiety that consumed her. Then, in the distance, the sound of an engine, a military truck, covered by a tarp, was slowly approaching. Time seemed to slow down. When the vehicle stopped, some soldiers got out, thin, exhausted, many with visible wounds. Some were helped by comrades. Their distant gazes revealed horrors they had experienced that words could never describe. Eva watched them one by one, her heart heavy and her hands cold. There was no sign of Lukas, but then, near the end, a limping soldier, leaning on a makeshift cane, scrambled down. He wore a worn and dirty uniform, and his face, though older, though marked by scars and a scraggly beard, was unmistakable. Era Lukas, it seemed as if she were gasping for air. For an instant, the whole world disappeared. Eva took a hesitant step forward, as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Lukas looked up, and when their eyes met, a soft glow crossed his tired face. He tried to smile, but the tears came faster. Eva ran, not caring who was watching her, not caring about her parents or the town. She ran to him and hugged him tightly, feeling his thin body, his protruding bones, but also the still present warmth of the man she loved so much. "My love, you're back, you're back," she whispered through tears. Lukas, in a hoarse voice, replied, "For you, Eva. Only for you could I return." The hug was long, strong, as if they wanted to make up for all the lost time, all the nights of absence, all the pain they had experienced. But soon, when she stepped back a little to look at Lukas more closely, Eva saw the marks the war had left on him. On his face, a scar across his temple. On his body, his hunched posture, his injured leg. And in his eyes, a deep weariness, a pain that words couldn't express. Still, to her, he was the same Lukas, the man she loved, the one she'd waited for. The marks only attested to his courage, his struggle to return. Lukas, for his part, dreaded Eva's gaze. For months, he'd wondered if she would still recognize him, if she would still accept him with all those scars. But when he saw the unconditional love in her eyes, he knew nothing could separate them. "I regret not being the man who left," he said in a weak voice. Eva held his face tenderly. "To me, you are more than ever the man I love. Not for appearances, but for the soul that resists. And it's that soul I've always hoped for." The people watched in silence. Many were moved. Even the most rigid began to see the strength of that love that neither war, nor families, nor time could destroy. But the battle wasn't won yet. Lukas needed to recover. And the families, though silent about the scene, still carried the weight of pride. But at that moment, Eva and Lukas knew they had won the biggest battle of all. Love had survived, and now, scars and all, they were together again. It was the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter marked not by waiting, but by rebuilding, by the life that could still be written between two. The days following the return of Lukas, they were a mixture of joy and uncertainty. Eva finally, he could see him, touch him, feel his breath beside him. But the scars of war went deeper than the eyes could. See, Lukas was a changed man. His weakened body, his leg marked by the wound, the nightmares that woke him in the middle of the night, all of it weighed on him. And yet, the flame between them remained intact, perhaps even stronger. "We survived," said Eve, every time he weakened. "Now we will build what the war tried to take away from us." But the world around them hadn't changed as much as they had. The families, still clinging to their pride, weren't willing to accept the reunion. Mr. Weissman, upon learning that Lukas had returned and that Eva had visited him daily during his recovery, exploded in fury. "It's not over yet," Eva shouted. "This man is an enemy. His insistence on dishonoring our family has crossed all boundaries." But Eva, strengthened by months of resistance, would not give up any longer. "Father, with all due respect, this war has taught us that there are things more important than old grudges. I love Lukas, he loves me, and none of you can change that." The mother, more silent, seemed shocked by her daughter's strength. Months of suffering had transformed Eva into a woman who knew what she wanted and no longer feared the consequences. Meanwhile, on the other side, the Kruger he also hesitated. Mr. Kruger, seeing the state his son had returned in, he felt a mixture of grief and guilt, but his pride still weighed heavily. Welcoming Eva back into the family would be a difficult blow for him to accept, but neither families, nor the remains of war, nor the opinions of the people would be enough to stop what was about to happen. Over time, Lukas's health improved. Little by little, he began to walk more steadily again. The nightmare nights became less frequent, and every morning, when he opened his eyes and saw Eva by his side, the certainty that there was a future to live was reinforced in his heart. It was one summer afternoon, in the middle of the countryside, where they had met secretly so many times, that Lukas made a decision. They sat under an old tree, the scent of wildflowers in the air. Lukas took Eva's hand affectionately. "I spent so much time in this dark world, struggling to survive, but there was always a light, your love. Now that I'm back, even with everything I'm carrying, I only want one thing, Eva. I want to build a life with you. No more hiding, no more fear." Eva's eyes filled with tears, but this time, tears of happiness. "It's everything I ever dreamed of," she answered. "I don't care what anyone says. I don't care if we have to fight anymore. I want to be with you, always." So they decided to make their love official, and they wouldn't ask for any more permission. When Days later, Eva announced to her parents that she would marry Lukas. The reactions were predictable. Her father threatened to throw her out of the house. Her mother cried, begging him to reconsider. But Eva was calm. "I've made my decision, and even if I have to walk out that door with nothing, I'll follow Lukas." Interestingly, on the side of Kruger, the reception was a little different. Mr. Kruger, though bitter, couldn't ignore what his son had experienced. The war had also devastated him, and for the first time, he seemed tired of the grudge he'd held for so long. "If that's what you want, Lukas, so be it." In the face of resistance from the families, the wedding was simple. No parties, no big celebrations. If it weren't for Eva and Lukas, it was the greatest moment of their lives. On a blue sky morning, in the small village chapel, with only a few loyal friends as witnesses, including Klaus, who had been a true guardian angel for both of them, promised each other eternal love, in joy and in sorrow, in peace and in war, in time and in eternity. As they walked hand in hand out of the church, Eva raised her face to the sun and smiled. There were no more chains, no more fear. They had won the external war and, more importantly, the internal war within their families and the society that judged them. Over time, even hardened hearts began to open. The suffering of the war had taught everyone harsh lessons. The inhabitants of Rosenwald, already weary of tragedy, began to see in that couple a symbol of hope, of rebirth. Mr. Weissman, although she never apologized directly, she gradually accepted Lukas's presence. Over time, Eva's mother allowed herself to meet her son-in-law, and deep down, realized that her daughter had made the right decision. Lukas and Eva rebuilt their lives with patience and love. The simple house they built together was, from day one, a true home, built not on conventions, but on a love that had survived everything. And every time night fell and the candles were lit, Eva would look at Lukas and say, "If someone ever asks me how we got through all of this, I'll say it was because we never stopped believing. Because even when the cards fell silent, even when the world fell apart, our love spoke louder." Lukas smiled and shook his hand, because now, finally, they were together. A love that survived the war, hate, in the moment, a love that no scar can erase. You've just discovered a love story that defied everything. Families, traditions, wars, and even time itself. If this story touched your heart, if at any point you imagined yourself in Eva's place, waiting for a letter that might never arrive, or in Lukas's place, fighting for love even surrounded by horror, then don't leave without leaving your support. I like this video, subscribe to the channel, letters from the front, and share this story, because stories like this can't be forgotten. They remind us that even in the darkest scenarios of humanity, love always finds a way to endure. And if you'd like to continue traveling with us through other stories of love, hope, and longing, I'll see you in the next video. See you then.